Hello, everyone, and you're all very welcome to this podcast. My name is Eamonn Coyle, and I am a chartered engineer and a chartered environmentalist. And I have been working in the construction industry for the last 30 years. And one of the many problems that I've come across over the years is a lack of information or poor information or disorganized information. And great initiatives have been made, particularly over the last 4 years, where the industry is moving from 2D drawings and they're moving towards BIM, which is building information modeling, which some people refer to as building information management. And today I'm in conversation with Ralph Montague from ArcDox, who is a BIM consultant and an expert in this area. This conversation is geared towards construction companies that are at the early stages of BIM adoption. And what we're going to try and do in this conversation is to explain to them what BIM is, which Ralph will be able to do very well. And then we'll go through the process of achieving full compliance and the stages that's involved. So, Ralph, thank you very much for joining me here today.
It's great to be here, Eamonn, and always a pleasure to talk to you. We've had many long conversations, and it sounds like we've been in the industry equally long. So we both had lots of experience in this industry.
Yes, I think I met you 10 years ago when I went to your office in Sandyford, and we had a great discussion about BIM, and I've stayed in contact with you, and I'm very grateful for all the help that you gave me. And if ever I was stuck relative to BIM, I certainly phoned you or sent you an email. I'd say, Ralph, can I talk to you? And you never said no. So I did a few presentations on BIM myself, but actually what I told them was what you taught me. So to get the podcast going, then, Ralph, would you give us a little bit about your background, your experience, and your qualifications?
Yeah, so I'm an architect. I'm a registered architect by profession, although more recently I've been working specifically in this area of information management, or BIM, but practiced as an architect for 15 years. I'm originally from South Africa, so studied in South Africa, worked in South Africa for a while, moved to Ireland 26 years ago, been working in Ireland as an architect and for a big architectural practice for a while. And then in 2009 started as ArcDox, which is a specialist consultancy which really aimed to help people with this problem of information management and how we saw technology helping that. And so so sort of stepped away from architectural design into more information management and consultancy, and along with that some other sort of support services like training and helping people, etc. So yeah, but a long time in the industry, has been involved in all shapes and sizes of projects, and so we understand the challenge that BIM's trying to solve, and we understand how it helps to solve those problems.
Thank you for that, Rob. That gives us a very good understanding of your background, your experience, and your expertise in the area of BIM. So one of the things that I came across in the industry over the past number of years is people, and I was at that stage myself at one time, wondering, what is BIM? Sometimes people think, well, the first time I remember having the conversation with you, and you said to me, I think some people think it's board schema. So the thing maybe you could do for us is to explain to us what exactly is BIM. There are some people that think it's just modeling. So Ralph, I'd be grateful if you could give us a...
Well, the first thing I would say is the whole acronym BIM is unhelpful to most people. It's very helpful for people who know about it because it's like a shortcut. You don't have to say building information modeling every time. You just say BIM, you know. But for people who don't know about it, it's not helpful at all. And if you went to a meeting and someone spoke about BIM and you said, well, I don't know what that is, and you went home and put it into Google, you would get the first thing that comes up is Board Ishkamara, which is the Irish Fisheries Board. And you'd think, well, what the hell's that got to do with anything? You know, so yeah, I suppose the first thing I would say is it's that information management is probably the best way to think about it, because in that sense, information management is something that we've been doing in our industry forever. You know, like in the history of time, nothing has ever been built without two people communicating with each other and sharing information, whether that information is shared with hand signals or verbally or scribbled on papyrus with a, you know, with a quill or chiseled into stone, whatever. Like we've been communicating with each other in order to do things together, and from the beginning of time. And that what we're doing there is exchanging information so that I can give you instruction as to how you can do your job to the satisfaction of what I want to pay you for. You know, so that's the exchange of information, the production of information and the exchange of information has always been around. And in that sense, BIM is nothing new, because it's really just about the production and exchange of information. But of course, as we've progressed over time, the technologies of information production and information exchange have changed. You know, and uh, if you're the same age as me, then you probably remember everything from telex to fax machines
I
to
do.
VHS and DVDs and CDs and whatever, you know. So we've been through a whole range of information technologies and exchanges, and in architecture and engineering, you know, one of the primary communication tools is drawings and specifications, and you know those drawings have been hand drafted in pencil and pen, and you know, and then used CAD systems. You know, the specifications and schedules have been produced in hand tables to Excel spreadsheets. You know, the documents have gone from typed letters to email to Word documents. Yeah, so uh, what's happening is the technologies of information production and information exchange are continually evolving, and people are maybe struggling to keep up with that, but because technology is changing very quickly, you know, and particularly in the last few years with AI and everything, it's sometimes it can seem very difficult to keep up. But so I you know, if you can frame BIM as not some weird and wonderful thing that's different to what we do, but rather an improvement on what we already been doing for all of our careers, then I think it begins to make more sense. So we now have the technologies to produce information far quicker. We can produce information in a better quality, and we can exchange that information over internet lines without having to be in the same room or printing it out or sending a courier. You know, so all of that's changed, and you know that's the best way to place BIM. It's in that evolution of information production, information exchange. Yeah,
Well, Ralph, thank you very much for that explanation.
yeah.
That provides
I
a
might
good
actually,
overview.
I can add one more thing just for the modeling, because sometimes the word modeling confuses people. You know, so information modeling is actually a computer science. So you can have a financial model, you can have an analytical model, you can have a, you know, so there's lots of information modeling, and building information modeling is simply the modeling of information around building, and the word building there, it's better to think of it as construction, because a bridge, you build a bridge, you build a road, you build a railway, you build a so yeah, a lot of people look at the word building and say, oh well, I'm involved in civil engineering projects, this has obviously got nothing to do with me. But that's absolutely wrong, because in civil engineering, there's as much production of and exchange of information as there is in any other type of building project. So it's equally as important.
Okay. All right, Rod, thanks again for that. Right, when I first met you, I remember talking to you about software. And I was all excited about the software, Revit, Navisworks, and all the different softwares that comes with BIM or part of BIM. And I remember you saying to me, buying the software won't make you BIM compliant. Would you mind elaborating on that?
Yeah, well, it's the same as buying a hammer won't make you a carpenter. You know, it's um, like you're like buying a tool doesn't make you proficient or competent in something. The tool makes a proficient and competent person more competent or more efficient, maybe. And that's what tools do. Tools make things easier. But if you give a tool to a 5-year-old, that doesn't make them competent or proficient. So the software is a tool. Software computers are a tool. Um, and what you need to know is how to use that tool. And there's not just one tool, because you're not a really good carpenter if you just have a hammer. You know, you probably need a saw and a screwdriver and different tools for different jobs. So a competent person understands the tools they need, and then they understand how to use those tools effectively. And so you have to look at everything holistically. You have to say, what is firstly, who are the people that have to do the work, and what work do they have to do? Some people produce information and give it to other people. Some people receive information and have to act on it. Both are involved in information, but they're involved slightly differently. So you have to look at the people and what their relationship with information is. Then you have to look at the business processes that are happening there. And then you can look at the tools. You have to look at all three things together: people, process, and technology. You can't just go to the hardware shop, buy a hammer, and expect to be a competent carpenter. You know, and that's the problem. People would like that. They would say, yeah, this sounds very complicated. Can you just tell me what I should buy? Um, and yeah, but that's not the answer. So what you really need to do is understand the job at hand and then find the best tools to do that job.
Okay, well, taking the analogy of the hammer and buying the hammer, and it's not going to make you a carpenter. Take a construction company anywhere in the world, let's say a small, medium-sized construction company that are not familiar with BIM, and they want to start doing public works where they have to be BIM compliant in the pretty near future. Would you mind explaining to us what stages will they have to go through to go from, say, level 0 compliant, no compliance, to achieving the full ISO 19650 standard and to be fully BIM compliant? Also, that they would have, say, the software, and that they would be able to use the software as much as what they need to, in the sense that they're not designers, but they will receive models from the design team and they'll have to work with the model, so that they have to navigate their way around the model. So, Ralph, I'd be grateful if you could explain to us what are the processes, what they'll have to go through, and how long it'll take them to be BIM compliant.
Yeah. Okay, that's quite a big question, but I suppose I would start and say, like, what does it mean to be BIM compliant? Okay. what it really means is that you're following a process, a standard. So most people in the construction industry would be aware of quality management standards like ISO 9001. Okay, what ISO 9001 as a quality management standard does is it gives some assurance to everyone on both sides of the contract that the people are following a due process of planning their work, doing their work in a methodical way, checking their work, and acting on any discrepancies they get, so that through the life cycle there can be some guarantee of quality. Yeah, and instead of saying that every time, um, the easiest thing is just to say you will do your work in accordance with ISO 9001. Or you get a certification. Your company goes and gets certified by the standards authority that's the way you work. So if you have a badge, a client can look at your company and say, okay, well, because I have the badge, I understand that somebody has audited this company to follow a due process so that I can be guaranteed of some quality. And it doesn't guarantee quality completely, because if you really understand the standards, you can basically be ISO 9001 compliant, saying I'm not going to do this, and then don't do it. And you still be compliant because you said what you were going to do and you did it. But that doesn't help the quality. So I think the best framing for compliance is to think in terms of standards. Now, standards like ISO 19650, they didn't come about just overnight. Over the last 30 plus years, the industry has been developing standards for how you should produce and manage information. And because in general, every company has their own way of doing it. So, you have your way of doing it, I have my way of doing it. And when you and I try and work together, our ways start clashing, because we don't follow a common standard. But when we start following a common standard, then it makes it easier for you and I to work together because we're working in a similar way. And so over the years, over 30 plus years, the industry has been documenting what works, what doesn't work, and the root of ISO 19650, although it was only published in 2018, goes back probably to the 1970s, but more specifically to the 1990s, when the British standard BS 1192 was updated to introduce CAD, because that's when we started introducing electronic production of information through CAD. And and over time, the British standard was updated again in 2007 to incorporate this concept of a common data environment or central repository for the management of digital files. And it was updated again in 2013 to bring in BIM as a sort of modeling process. So where you combined 3D modeling with the management of data and documents. So and that's an important point, because BIM isn't just 3D modeling. It's the combination of 3D modeling plus data management plus document management.
Yes.
That was 2013. And then there were various British standard updates, and eventually those standards went to ISO, which is the International Standards Organization, which is a worldwide group of people. And I suppose it's also important to say that ISO, the way it works is it's not a few people in a dark room making up some arbitrary standards. These are written by industry people in different countries that come together through their national standards authority. So it's industry experience that is feeding into these development of standards. So once a standard like ISO 19650 comes out, it's been through many, many years of iteration as the document of best practice in the industry. And that's important to say that that best practice just means it's the best you can do across all the countries. It doesn't mean it's the best. You might find a better way, you might find some novel idea that is better, but it's not applicable across all countries and all industries, etc. So, but once you have a standard like ISO 19650, then when a client says, I want you to be compliant with that, what they're really saying is, I want you to follow best practice, and why shouldn't a client want that? I mean, I often use the example, if you go to a doctor, like, what do you want from your doctor? Do you want poor practice or best practice?
Yes, that's a very, very good analogy. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, like you don't know your doctor, but you would say to your doctor, look, I want the best because I'm sick and I want to get better. Don't give me the worst, give me the best. That Now there's some constraints, maybe there's budget constraints or technological constraints in your region, etc. But you're still aiming for the best. You're not aiming for the worst. And you would like to know that your doctor has been keeping up to date. Maybe your doctor graduated 30 years ago, and he's never read a medical journal since. So he's giving you 30-year-old medical advice, which isn't really good because medicine has changed, diagnostics have changed, treatment methods have changed. So you really want a doctor who knows what they're talking about, don't you?
Yes,
you
but
want you
isn't
want
that the
best
case?
practice.
Yes, for sure, that makes sense. But isn't that the case for CPD, continuous professional development? Because one of the things that I'm familiar with is that if you graduated from university today, let's say you got your degree today, that degree is out of date within a month in the sense that things move on. So I'm a member of Engineers Ireland and also the Society of the Environment in England, and I have to do a minimum of 50 hours of CPD every year in order to stay abreast of developments. And this conversation is part of CPD, where I'm learning about BIM, and hopefully other people, the viewers, will get the benefit of this conversation as well.
Yeah, it is the point, but I suppose the question I would have is the CPD working? Because why is it that most of the industry doesn't know what best practice is when it comes to the production and exchange of information? Why is it this strange and wonderful thing that clients are suddenly asking for? And like if CPD was working, then everybody would have followed the journey for the last 30 years, and everybody would be working to ISO 19650 because it's best practice, not because you're asked to do it. Because why would you do anything else? If why would you purposefully choose to work in the worst possible way when the best possible way is available? So yes, we have all our professional institutes have CPD requirements in terms of hours, but if you looked at across the industry and you said, okay, is everybody working to the best practice standards in information management? You'd have to say no. Like, because people are up in arms, like, why do I suddenly have to do this ISO 19650 thing? It's not suddenly. You should have been managing information to the best practice available throughout your career. It's not a sudden thing.
Yes, but
So
what I would say that CPD, I think that's down, I think the failing is down to the individual in the sense that there is good professional best practice CPD available. So it's up to the individual to make sure that they complete or undertake CPD that is relevant to their work. So take this conversation as CPD. I'm learning about BIM. So I will be in a better position after this conversation to apply BIM principles in line with the standard that you mentioned, 19650.
Yeah, yeah, and that's great. But what we need is everyone. Like, if I just want to use the analogy of the medical profession. But if there's 100 doctors in a hospital, you don't want one doctor who knows what they're doing and 99 doctors that don't know what they're doing. That's because then when you go to hospital, you're not sure what you're getting. Are you getting the one doctor who knows what he's doing, or are you getting one of the 99 people who don't know what they're doing? What you really want is 100 doctors that know what they're doing, to industry standard. And you want the hospital to say to you when you come in, all of our doctors comply to the best available practice. And if they don't, well, then you can sue them for malpractice. But imagine that same conversation in the building industry. You walk into the building industry, you're a client, say, and you walk into a team meeting and you say, right, I want best industry practice. And everybody says, no ways, you're not getting that. Or they say, if you want that, then it's going to be double the price.
Well, my experience of construction industry, and this is from Scotland, England, and America. My experience has been that construction is low on the uptake of information technology. Is that your experience?
Yeah, it's documented. I mean, there's been
Yes.
numerous studies and reports, and so I mean, there was a McKinsey report, I think it was back in 2017, 2018, I can't remember, but construction was second last out of all the sectors. I think it was only fishing or hunting, that was worse than construction when it came to the adoption of technology. So, um, yeah, so that's absolutely true, and and there's many reasons for that. There's kind of the fragmented nature of the industry. It's much easier when if everyone in a factory is working for one company and the company says we will work to these standards, then it's much easier. But when everyone working on a project works for 50 different companies, it's very difficult to say across all those 50 companies, we'll all work to this standard, unless there's something above that's saying, and that's why the driver in many countries has been either the government or client bodies, because they obviously hold the purse strings. So it's much easier for a government or a client to say, on this project or on our projects, we want you to work to these standards, because then, or you don't get the job, you know. But for a group of companies to come together and decide by themselves to work to a particular standard is quite difficult, because there's competing priorities. Some people just want to get the job done and move on to the next job. They don't really care.
Well, I think that brings us to, let's say, strategy, our corporate culture. And I think in the industry that the culture is questionable. And I think sometimes that people don't pay enough attention to culture because it's hidden. And there's a business guru or a consultant, Drucker, I think is his name. And Porter is the guy that advocates for strategy. And what Drucker said, forget about strategy unless you get your culture right, because unless you have the culture right, nothing will work. So I think that a big cultural shift is required. But I remember speaking with a lecturer at Griffith College probably more than 14 years ago, Michael from Australia, and he just specifically said, changing culture is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think at the top of all of that is incentives. If you're a small contractor or small subcontractor involved in a project and you have a very limited amount of work to do, and your price has been negotiated down to the bare minimum, um, you really just want to get the job done and move on. You don't want to sit in meetings and talk about best practice in information management or anything like that. Um, so the incentive structures that throughout the way the industry is structured is not helping. And but I think the better way to think about it is for each person and for each company to think about themselves. So as an individual, I'm more valuable to the industry or to my company or to whatever if I'm competent. I'm not just a 5-year-old with a hammer. I'm actually somebody who can use it. So so if you start at the individual level and saying, well, competency and understanding helps me personally to be better at my job, and that gives me a much better chance to have a good job and or good practice, and then to look at your company and say, well, if the company as a whole was super efficient and organized in the way it worked, then it could avoid a lot of the rework and abortive work and changing work that happens. Like people lose money because they've agreed a price for a job, but they end up doing the job 6 or 7 times because they do something quickly and then they have to come back and fix it later, and nobody's paying them for that rework because it's included in the price. And so as a company, you can begin to to change the culture internally to your own benefit, and then that can filter out into groups of companies that work together. So it's difficult to say whether change is top down or bottom up or middle out. There's been lots of studies in to monitor that, but I don't think there's one easy answer. Some countries have tried the top down approach. The government just enforcing BIM. Other countries have worked bottom up. And they both have their pros and cons. But it is, at the end of the day, it is a change management project. People have a way of working that is less than optimal, and in order to become more optimal, they have to change, and people need to see the reason to do that. So
Well, Ralph, you mentioned best practice. My own experience has been you explained about the difficulty of getting to best practice, and you've also explained about some people, maybe some companies that just want to get in, get the job done, get back out. But my own experience has been is that if you adopt best practice and if you run with best practice and if you implement best practice, then you will be more efficient and more profitable. Would you agree with that?
yeah, well, depends how you measure efficiency. I think it'll be more profitable in the long run. I
Yes.
mean, when people measure efficiency, they often think in short time windows. So it's more efficient for me to give you incomplete and bad information today than it is to give you complete and good information because it takes me longer. So it's less efficient. But if I give you incomplete and bad information today, I'm going to have to fix that 6 or 7 times. And so if I'm measuring efficiency in a short window, then the efficient thing is to do an incomplete job. But if I'm measuring efficiency in a longer window, then it's much more efficient to do it right the first time. So the question of efficiency isn't really an easy one to look at. You have to think in longer windows. But overall, it's far more profitable to do it right the first time, because you're not wasting time and money fixing stuff over and over again. So and that's the problem. Like, profit margins in our industry are ridiculously low, because we basically spend all our time and money fixing stuff over and over again, when we could be using that profit either to build our businesses or enjoy our time off, and etc.
Well, I worked on jobs in England maybe 30 years ago, and the jobs ended profitably. But for the following year, when the contractor went back and fixed all the defects, the profit turned into a loss.
Yeah.
So that was, and the other thing that you mentioned about getting it right first time, that is the philosophy of total quality management. Get it right first time, every time.
Yeah. But get it right first time, measured in short windows, isn't the most efficient thing to do. Like, get it out the door incomplete is very efficient.
Yeah, but not productive.
But it's not. Yeah, so it's like the difference. I don't know if I'm sure you've heard the book Stephen Covey, The Seven
Yes.
Habits of Highly Effective People. But he talks about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. So effectiveness is getting the job done right. Efficiency is getting something done, but it's the wrong thing. So you can be highly efficient at doing the wrong thing. But that's not the measure. What you should be measuring is, are you doing the right thing? And that's why quality management standards like ISO 9001 are there. It's about defining, before you do the work, what it is that good work looks like, and then doing the work. And the problem in our industry is we don't want to do that first part, the plan part. We just want to go straight into doing. We just want to draw drawings and write emails and make spreadsheets. They're all wrong, and they create all sorts of problems for everyone. But we were very efficient at making lots of information that's wrong. And
well, I'm familiar with what you talked about: plan, do, check, and act. And I know it's going back to the 80s. Dr. Deming approach to total quality management: plan, do, check, and act. And I remember having this conversation with you before. The 4 stages are very important, but my experience going back over the years, even working in Scotland and working in England, is that contractors go straight to the doing and they ignore the planning. And I know of a project, a nuclear power station, where the Japanese spent, taking a 5-year project, the Japanese spent a year in planning, and they built the job in, I think, 3 years, which is a total of 4 years. And the British then built a similar job, and they spent something like 3 months in planning, and it took them 6 years to build a similar power station. Whereas the importance of planning,
and probably another 6 years in fixing problems afterwards.
Probably, yeah. So planning and preparing for the job is absolutely critical, and that, in my experience, gets missed out. But there's also pressure on contractors from clients with this sod cutting business. Once a contract is awarded, I believe that the team should sit down, get around the table and say, right, okay, what we want you to do now is plan for this job properly, understanding the job. Spend time planning, but the client puts them under pressure to get to site so that they can get their photograph on the front page of the local paper cutting the sod. And I did a presentation one time to a team of project managers, and I spoke about this planning. And I said to them, try and understand the job up front before you ever go to site. Study the drawings, study the specifications, study the project-specific documentation, study the bill of quantities, and know what it is that you're going to build. So understand the job up front. And one of the project managers said to me, jokingly, but there was a huge element of truth in the joke. He said, we hardly understand the job at the end, which I can relate to.
Yeah.
In the sense that they learn as they go along. They build something that doesn't work. I know of a company that built a lift shaft. And it was a cast in situ lift shaft. And they didn't cut out the doors. So once the lift shaft was built 6 stories, they then had to bring in diamond cutters and they cut out the doors. And that was massive because, like, I mean, you're talking about 300 millimeter thick walls, and you couldn't cut that in one go. So they had to cut in sections, manageable sections. So the upfront planning, and that is the thing with BIM as well. Upfront planning, learning, training, understanding, and making sure that you know what BIM is and to understand as far as you need to an understanding of the software.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just summed up the biggest benefit of BIM right there, is that you can build the project twice. So you can
Yes.
build the project in software,
Yes.
and you can find those missing door openings. You can you can find all the problems where it's easy and quick and cheap to change it. Like when you have to put in a door opening into a 300 mil concrete wall in software, it costs you nothing. Well, it costs you a little bit of time, but no diamond cutters, no like no, is the change is incredibly cheap and safe. You know, there's no safety issues around diamond cutting, etc. Putting an opening into a 300 concrete wall on site is the most expensive, most dangerous, and most disruptive place to do it. So the question is like, when should you find out that that problem exists? And the BIM philosophy is you should find that out before you get to site. You should build the project in software, find all those issues, and resolve them there, because that's quick and cheap and easy, and you don't waste any material, you don't waste any labor, except for the labor of the people doing the design, but you don't put anyone's life at risk, and you don't incur any significant costs. Whereas if you leave that issue to later, which is what most people do on projects, they leave all the issues to later, then that incurs cost for someone. Now, as a contractor, you might say, well, it doesn't really matter because I'm going to pass the cost on to the client through a variation. Yeah, and maybe you have good procedures and you're able to do that, but that cost goes somewhere. Somebody has to pay for it at the end of the day. And the client might be a public authority saying, well, it doesn't really matter because, like the government will pay, or the taxpayer will pay, or, you know, so if you take our famous children's hospital as an example, you know, I mean, does the contractor mind that the project's gone from 600 million to 2 billion? Probably not, because they're making more money. Do the designers mind? Probably not, because they're making more money. Does the actual HSE mind? Probably not, because at the end of the day, the taxpayers are gonna to foot the bill. So like, but the thing is, the cost is incurred and it does go somewhere. And like, it would have been much better to build that hospital in software completely, and find all those problems and use the extra money to build 3 other hospitals. But instead, we've spent 3 times the price on one hospital, and it's taken twice as long as it should have.
Okay,
So
Ralph, I'm aware that the hospital could have been built digitally in Navisworks. Is that correct? In Navisworks, you could build it
oh, no,
digitally.
no, no. So Navisworks is just a checking tool. You don't actually author anything in Navisworks. So you'd have to build it in BIM authoring software like Revit or ArchiCAD or Tekla. Um, you know, those tools are just like different colored hammers. Like you have a yellow hammer and a red one. um, so it's not really the, the the tool. You use the tool that's good for the job. But the 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 philosophy in the industry is it's not my problem. I'll pass it down the road. So instead of the design team trying to figure out all the problems as much as possible, the kind of philosophy is, well, we'll do enough to hand it over to the contractor, and they can sort it out. And then the contractor says, well, I'll do enough, but I'll hand it down to the subcontractors. They can sort it out. The subcontractor says, well, I'm going to send some of this to a subcontractor or a supplier, and everyone's kind of passing the problem down the road. But what happens is the resolution of the problem is going into the most expensive, most dangerous, most disruptive phase of the project, and that's on site. What the BIM philosophy is trying to do is flip that around and saying, like, let's get it right before we go to site, before we order material, before we commit labor, before we put cranes up and all these things. Let's get it right as much as we can. And then, so it's that plan in the plan, do, check, act. It's taking the plan part to the extreme as far as you can. No, I mean, there's limits, obviously, so there's extremes. You could say we do zero planning and figure it out all during the do phase, or you could overdo the planning and never get to the do phase. So there's a balance.
Yes, of course.
But I think in general the industry's balance is let's just do it and figure it out while we're doing it.
Yeah, that's a long-standing practice.
Yeah. And as you said, like, the diamond cutter who's cutting those openings, he doesn't mind. That's work for him. He's making a living, so he probably likes the idea that people leave those openings out.
So where is the industry relative to full compliance 19650 in Ireland?
Well, I'd say we have a two-tier industry. We have some absolutely brilliant companies in Ireland, probably the best in the world. Working across Ireland, the UK, Europe, working for top-tier clients. They've been doing this for 10 plus years, and then you have the guys who still think BIM is board ishkamara, fish and chips on a Friday afternoon.
Very good.
So you got it, and you got everything in between. But what is happening in Ireland, and this probably relates to a lot of people, is that the government, since 2024, have started implementing BIM on all public projects. So now it's a 4-year that will be complete. So by 2028, all projects, every project that's done for the government will be done in BIM, and everything, housing, whatever, So now most people might say, well, we don't work for the government, but the government is probably about a third of all the work, construction work. So even if you're a small contractor, you might end up subcontracting something on a government project. You will have to do BIM. And so it's coming, and you can wait until it comes, or until you lose a job because you don't have the capability, and then pay attention, or you can start getting yourself ready, and that's entirely your decision. My advice that I give most people is, it's much easier to change when you're not under pressure, but it's also easier to do nothing when you're not under pressure. But the intelligent people are the ones who anticipate what's happening and move, without pressure. Other people wait until there's a shitstorm, and then they panic, or they lose the job. So yeah, it's very difficult to monitor a whole industry, but that's my view of it. There's a two-tier industry, but it's happening. Like, you can't stop. You're not going to go back to fax machines. We're not going to go back to telex machine. We're gonna like technology advances, AI is here now. You're not going to stop technology, so you're either going to get on board or you're going to be left out.
Well, I did a presentation on BIM quite a number of years ago, and I've explained the benefits, potential benefits that it can bring to companies. And I spent a lot of time on the benefits and justifying why they should go for it. But I ended up then saying that, well, actually, if none of the benefits ring home with you, what I will say is that all government jobs are mandated to be BIM compliant by 2028. So actually, if you're going to do public works, you'll have to be BIM compliant. And you made the point that it's better to achieve compliance when you're not under pressure than try and catch up.
Yeah. And I'd also make the point is that good information management practice is good for your business.
Yes.
It's good for you as an individual. So, like as an individual, you become more valuable to your company or to the industry. As a company, you become more profitable, you deliver better quality product, you develop you you know so you just become a better company, and so there's many benefits to change anyway, but you will eventually have to. So it's really it's a personal decision for everyone. There's a lot of people in the industry, let's be honest, that are just hoping they can retire before anything happens. uh you know if I can eke out another 5 years in my old-fashioned way of doing things, I'll be happy.
Well, Ralph, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and knowledge, and sharing your expertise with us. I'm extremely grateful to you. So I hope now that for our viewers who are watching this podcast, that you have a better understanding of BIM and that it's not just, as I thought many years ago, buying the software. It's a philosophy, it's a professional way of approaching, and it is an effective and efficient means of creating, managing, and sharing information. So if you're working on a job and you were dealing with a lot of documentation, that if ever you left the job and if the job was properly BIM compliant, if somebody else took over, they would be familiar with the system and they'd be able to follow what you were doing quite easily. So again, Ralph, thank you so much. So I'll just leave you if you'd like to make a final thought or comment that you would like to add just before we finish up.
Yeah, well, I think the question for everyone is this relevant to me? you know the first time somebody hears about BIM, the immediate thought is this isn't relevant to me. If you're a project manager, you think, well, what's this got to do with me? I don't do 3D modeling, you know. um, or if you're a quantity surveyor, or civil engineer, or but what you need to do is just stop for a minute. As a project manager, just take that for example. That is your business. Like, as a project manager, you're receiving information from people, you're assessing the information, and you're giving instruction to other people. There's you can't actually do the job of project management without information. Like, if you subtracted information from the role of project manager, they wouldn't know what to do. You know, so information management and project management are so tightly connected, and or the same with quantity surveyors. Like, you think, well, I just do the costs. I don't deal with 3D models. But when everybody in the project is creating the information in digital format, you printing it out and using a scale rule and highlighting pen to measure it is out of date. Like, you need to be able to take that digital data and process it digitally and come to the answer much quicker. Environmental analysis, all sorts of, like, every discipline touches information. So So the thing I would leave everyone with is this is relevant to you in some way, and you have to find out for yourself why it's relevant to you and how it's going to make your life better and your business better, and then you're on your way. But the longer you assume that your job doesn't touch information, the harder it's going to become for you.
Okay, Ralph, thanks again. Thank you very much, for our viewers. What I recommend, if you're interested in BIM and if you want to go down the BIM route, ISO 19650, which is the internationally recognized standard, and if there's anything at all you want to know about BIM, the philosophy, the approach, and what we discussed in this podcast, I highly recommend that you get in touch with Ralph. He's very easily found. He worked for ArcDox. And if you just Google him, you'll find him fairly quickly. I think the website is www.arcdox.com. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So Ralph, thanks again. And
Thank you, Eamonn.
I look forward to our next discussion. And to the viewers, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this informative podcast.
Appreciate your time. It's great talking to you again.
You too.